Effective communication is the cornerstone of success in every area of life, personal, professional, and beyond. Yet it's a skill many of us take for granted or fail to develop fully. The way we communicate shapes our relationships, influences how others perceive us, and determines the quality of our interactions. But communication isn't just about speaking clearly or getting our message across. It's about understanding others, listening actively, and knowing how to respond in ways that foster connection, trust, and mutual respect. In this book, we'll explore the art of effective communication and how mastering it can unlock opportunities you never thought possible. Whether you're navigating complex conversations with a colleague, strengthening your relationships with family and friends, or learning how to present yourself confidently in any setting, the principles we'll cover will equip you with the tools to communicate with purpose, clarity, and influence. What you'll discover here is not just theoretical knowledge but practical, actionable advice you can start applying right away. You'll learn how to handle difficult conversations without escalating conflict, how to listen in a way that makes people feel valued, and how to speak with confidence without coming across as arrogant. The goal is simple: to help you understand the impact of your words and actions and give you the strategies to use them to create better outcomes in every interaction. By the time you finish this book, you'll have a deeper understanding of how to communicate effectively with anyone in any situation. This isn't just about improving your speech or perfecting your body language. It's about mastering a skill that will open doors, strengthen your relationships, and ultimately drive your success. The principles you'll learn will give you a competitive edge in the workplace, enhance your personal life, and lead to stronger, more meaningful connections with those around you. Communication is the key to achieving lasting success, and the journey to mastering it starts here. Every conversation is an opportunity, and by unlocking the secrets of effective communication, you'll be well on your way to building a life of connection, growth, and achievement. Chapter 1. Changing how you think about communication. When you think about communication, what comes to mind? Most people probably think about having conversations, making small talk, or exchanging information. But the truth is, communication is much more than just talking. It's the way we connect with the world around us, the way we form relationships, the way we solve problems, and even the way we shape our lives. How you communicate directly impacts the relationships you build, the career you develop, and the quality of your life. Yet, so many of us go through life thinking communication is just about sending messages back and forth. We speak to be heard. We listen to respond, but rarely do we stop and think about the deeper purpose behind it all. Changing how you think about communication can be the key to transforming not just your conversations, but your entire approach to connecting with others. Think about it for a second. Every time you communicate with someone, you're creating a moment that could strengthen or weaken your relationship. Whether it's with a friend, a family member, a colleague, or even a stranger, your words, actions, and the way you carry yourself all have an impact. Communication isn't just about exchanging information. It's about creating bonds, understanding others, and expressing yourself clearly. When you start looking at communication this way, everything changes. You stop seeing communication as something you do and start seeing it as a tool that builds something. You begin to understand that your words, tone, body language, and even your silence are powerful tools for creating connection, trust, and understanding. When you speak with intention, every conversation becomes an opportunity for deeper connection and growth. Consider how many times you've had a conversation where you walked away thinking, "I didn't really connect with that person," or "I didn't get my point across clearly." Or maybe you've had times when someone else's words made you feel dismissed, misunderstood, or disconnected. We all have these experiences, but often we don't take the time to figure out why. What went wrong? And more importantly, how can we prevent it from happening again? Changing how you think about communication is the first step in becoming more effective in your conversations. It's about realizing that communication is not a one-way street. It's not just about getting your own point across. It's about creating a space where both sides feel heard, understood, and respected. Effective communication is a partnership between two or more people, and it requires active involvement, awareness, and care from everyone involved. In every conversation, the goal should not just be to talk, but to connect. Think about the people you enjoy talking to the most. They aren't necessarily the ones who talk the most or dominate the conversation. In fact, the best communicators are often the ones who listen the most. They know that communication isn't just about sharing your own thoughts. It's about understanding others and building a relationship of trust and respect. When you begin to shift your mindset to this new way of thinking about communication, you'll start to see conversations in a different light. Instead of focusing on what you need to say, you'll start focusing on how you can connect with the other person. What do they need to hear from you? What's the best way to make sure your words are clear and kind? How can you truly understand their perspective and make them feel heard? This shift in thinking doesn't just make your conversations more enjoyable. It also makes them more effective. You'll find that people are more willing to engage with you, more willing to listen, and more willing to open up. They'll feel respected and valued in a way that encourages them to reciprocate the same level of care and understanding. The first step in changing how you communicate is to ask yourself one important question. What do I want to achieve with this conversation? If your goal is to simply be heard, you'll likely only focus on making sure you say everything you need to say. But if your goal is to connect with the other person, you'll start thinking about how to create a back-and-forth exchange where both parties are engaged and the conversation flows naturally. Once you start to look at communication through this lens, you'll realize that every conversation has the potential to be more than just a simple exchange of words. It can be an opportunity to strengthen a relationship, to build trust, or to solve a problem together. And in doing so, you'll be able to make the most out of every conversation, whether it's with a friend, a colleague, or someone you just met. Think about the last time you had a meaningful conversation with someone. It wasn't just about getting through a list of things you needed to discuss. It was about connecting. Maybe you laughed together, shared an experience, or worked through a challenge as a team. That's the power of communication done right. Now imagine how many more of those moments you could create if you approached every conversation with this new mindset. You would have better relationships with the people you care about, more success at work, and greater influence over time. Your conversations would no longer feel like a chore or a task, but an opportunity to connect on a deeper level. But here's the catch. Changing how you think about communication is not an overnight process. It takes time, patience, and practice. You can't expect to go from thinking of communication as just talking to seeing it as a powerful tool for connection without putting in the effort. But that's okay, because once you start making this shift, you'll notice the difference almost immediately. As you move forward, start paying attention to how you communicate. Are you really listening when others speak? Or are you just waiting for your turn to talk? Are you being intentional about the words you choose? Or are you just saying whatever comes to mind? Are you focused on connecting with the other person? Or are you more concerned about getting your point across? By becoming more mindful of how you communicate, you can begin to practice being a better communicator, not just in the big moments, but in the everyday conversations that shape your relationships and your life. You'll find that the more you practice, the easier it gets, and before long, you'll have developed a new approach to communication that sets you up for success in every area of your life. Changing the way you think about communication isn't just about learning a new skill or technique. It's about adopting a mindset that transforms how you engage with others. It's about realizing that every conversation has the potential to be meaningful and impactful if you approach it with care, awareness, and a desire to truly connect. When you begin to communicate with this intention, you'll see how much more rewarding and successful your interactions will be. Ultimately, the way you think about communication affects everything. If you see it as an opportunity to connect, listen, and build trust, you'll find that your relationships improve, your career thrives, and your life becomes richer and more fulfilling. So as you move forward, start to shift your mindset. Begin to see communication as the powerful tool it truly is, and with time, you'll become a more effective, empathetic, and confident communicator. Chapter 2. Listening to understand, not just respond. When we talk about listening, most people think of it as simply hearing the words someone says. It's an automatic response, a reflex. You hear sounds, you recognize words, and maybe you respond. But the truth is, listening is much more than that. Listening is an art, and the way we listen can completely change the outcome of any conversation. The way most people approach listening is with one goal in mind: to wait for their turn to speak. You listen just enough to catch the main points, then you jump in with your own thoughts. This kind of listening is transactional. You're not truly engaged in what the other person is saying. You're thinking about your own response while they're still talking. This is why so many conversations feel shallow and why misunderstandings happen so often. It's not because we don't care, but because we're not fully listening. Real listening, the kind that leads to better understanding and stronger relationships, is about being present. It's about focusing entirely on the person in front of you. It's not just about hearing their words, but also understanding the meaning behind them. When you listen to understand, you're not just waiting for your chance to talk. You're actually engaging with the person's thoughts and feelings. This is what makes a conversation meaningful. Imagine talking to someone who isn't just hearing your words, but is actively trying to understand the message you're trying to convey. They don't interrupt or finish your sentences for you. Instead, they lean in, make eye contact, and nod, showing they're really hearing you. Doesn't that make you feel like you matter? Like what you're saying is important? That's the power of listening with intention. Listening to understand requires a shift in mindset. It means setting aside your own thoughts, opinions, and judgments long enough to fully take in what the other person is saying. You stop thinking about how you'll respond and start focusing on their words, their emotions, their perspective. This is harder than it sounds, especially in a world where distractions are everywhere. But when you make the effort to truly listen, you're telling the other person, "I care about what you have to say." This alone can change the entire tone of a conversation. You don't need to be an expert to listen better. It's a skill that anyone can develop, and it starts with being more mindful of your own tendencies. Do you find yourself interrupting? Do you finish other people's sentences? Do you zone out when someone is talking for a long time? These are all signs that you may be listening to respond, not to understand. The first step is to become aware of how you listen. Think about the last conversation you had where you felt truly heard. Maybe it was with a close friend, a family member, or even a colleague. How did that make you feel? Likely, it made you feel valued and respected. And the truth is, people respond well to that kind of attention. When you truly listen to someone, they're more likely to trust you, share more openly, and engage more deeply in the conversation. One of the most powerful things you can do to improve your listening skills is to remove distractions. In today's world, distractions are everywhere. Phones, computers, noise, thoughts about the future. It's easy to be physically present in a conversation but mentally elsewhere. When you're having a conversation with someone, put down your phone, turn off the television, and focus completely on the person in front of you. This simple act shows that you care about what they're saying. Sometimes, listening means giving someone the space to speak without interrupting, even if it feels uncomfortable. Pauses in conversation can feel awkward, but they're important. They allow the person speaking to gather their thoughts, and they give you the chance to process what's been said. Instead of rushing to fill the silence with your own words, take a moment to reflect on what you've heard. When you give someone that kind of attention, they feel valued. And it's in these moments of thoughtful listening that deeper connections are built. It's also important to listen with empathy. Empathy is the ability to understand and share the feelings of another person. It's one thing to hear someone's words. It's another to understand how they feel while saying them. Maybe someone is frustrated, sad, or excited. By listening with empathy, you can pick up on the emotions behind the words and respond in a way that shows you truly understand them. Have you ever had a conversation where you're speaking about something personal, and the other person seems completely disconnected? They might nod their head, but you can tell they're not really hearing you. It's frustrating, right? It's because they're not listening with empathy. They're not tuned into your emotions. And as a result, the connection between you starts to fade. On the other hand, when someone listens with empathy, it's like they're right there with you, feeling what you feel. It builds trust and strengthens the relationship. Another aspect of listening is being patient. We often have a tendency to want to fix problems or offer solutions as soon as someone starts speaking. But sometimes people don't need solutions. They just need to be heard. When someone is sharing a problem with you, try to resist the urge to immediately jump in with advice. Instead, focus on listening to their feelings and offering your support. By simply being present, sometimes the most powerful thing you can do is just listen. Effective listening also involves asking the right questions. When you listen to understand, you can ask questions that encourage deeper conversation and help clarify the other person's point of view. It's not about interrogation. It's about showing genuine interest in what they're saying. Questions like, "How did that make you feel?" Or, "Can you tell me more about that?" Open the door for deeper discussion and show that you're fully engaged in the conversation. It's easy to think that listening is just passive, that you're just sitting there absorbing information. But the truth is, listening is an active process. It requires your full attention and a willingness to engage. You can't listen to understand if your mind is wandering, or if you're already thinking about the next thing you're going to say. It requires discipline and a commitment to truly connect with the person you're talking to. When you listen with intention, you're not just hearing words. You're understanding the person behind those words. Listening to understand also improves your ability to communicate effectively. When you take the time to fully understand someone's point of view, it becomes much easier to respond in a way that's thoughtful and considerate. You can build on what they've said instead of jumping to conclusions or offering irrelevant responses. This makes conversations more productive, less frustrating, and more enjoyable for everyone involved. The power of listening goes beyond just improving conversations. It can also change the way people see you. When you consistently listen with empathy, attention, and care, people begin to trust you more. They'll feel heard and understood, and this leads to stronger relationships, whether personal or professional. People are naturally drawn to those who make them feel seen and valued. So how do you start practicing listening to understand? It begins with being mindful of your own behavior. Pay attention to how often you interrupt or zone out. Challenge yourself to really focus on the speaker and their message. If your mind starts to wander, gently bring it back to the conversation. Practice empathy by trying to tune into the emotions behind the words. When you listen deeply, you create an environment where people feel safe, valued, and respected. By learning to listen not just with your ears but with your heart and mind, you'll become a better communicator, a better friend, a better partner, and a better leader. You'll find that people open up to you more, share more honestly, and connect with you on a deeper level. And the best part? You'll begin to notice the difference in how your relationships evolve, becoming stronger, more trusting, and more fulfilling. Chapter 3. Your body speaks too. Pay attention when you're talking to someone. It's not just the words that matter. What you say is important, but how you say it can make all the difference. Communication goes far beyond speech. Your body is constantly speaking, even when your mouth isn't moving. The way you carry yourself, the way you stand or sit, the gestures you use, your facial expressions, these things can either reinforce what you're saying or completely undermine it. Think about it. Have you ever spoken to someone who said all the right things, but their body language just didn't match? Maybe their arms were crossed, they weren't making eye contact, or they were looking at their phone while you were talking. Even though the words they were using might have been polite or caring, their body was telling a completely different story. Your body speaks volumes. In fact, it often communicates more clearly than the words you use. Body language has a way of revealing emotions, intentions, and attitudes, sometimes even when you don't realize it. You might be saying one thing, but if your body is saying something else, that's what people will pick up on. It's a natural response. We all do it, whether we realize it or not. If you're telling someone you're interested in what they're saying but you're slouching or fidgeting, the person you're talking to will likely feel that you're not really engaged. Your body is sending a message that doesn't match your words, and that can lead to confusion or even distrust. This is why paying attention to your body language is just as important as being mindful of your words. If you want to connect with people on a deeper level, you have to communicate clearly with both your words and your body. If your physical cues and verbal cues are aligned, the person you're communicating with is more likely to believe and trust you. But if they're mismatched, it can cause a disconnect. You might say, "I'm fine." But if your posture is tense and your arms are crossed, it's pretty obvious that you're not fine. People tend to trust body language over words because it's harder to fake. The first thing to understand about body language is that it's often unconscious. Most of us don't think about it until we're in a situation where we need to be more aware of it. But once you start paying attention, you'll begin to notice that your body is always speaking, whether you're sitting in a meeting, having a casual conversation with a friend, or interacting with a stranger. Your body is sending signals. For example, eye contact is one of the most important forms of nonverbal communication. When you look someone in the eye, you're not just acknowledging them. You're showing that you're present, engaged, and interested. Avoiding eye contact, on the other hand, can come across as evasive or disinterested. If you're nervous, you might find yourself looking away, but consciously making the effort to maintain eye contact can help you come across as more confident and sincere. It's a small adjustment, but it can make a huge difference in how you're perceived. Another key element of body language is posture. The way you carry yourself tells a lot about your emotional state and attitude. If you're standing tall with your shoulders back and your head held high, you naturally project confidence. People are more likely to take you seriously, and you'll feel more confident too. But if you're slouching or hunched over, you might come across as insecure or disengaged. When you're in a conversation, try to stand or sit up straight. It not only makes you look more open and confident, but it also helps you feel more focused and engaged in the discussion. Your hands can also be a powerful tool in communication. How often do you find yourself using your hands to emphasize what you're saying? Hand gestures can help reinforce your words, making your message more memorable and clear. But like anything else, too much can be distracting. For example, if you're gesturing constantly while speaking, it might make you seem nervous or like you're trying too hard to communicate something. On the flip side, keeping your hands still can sometimes come across as stiff or overly formal. The key is finding balance. Use your hands to help tell your story, but don't let them overshadow your words. Facial expressions also play a huge role in communication. Think about how often your face gives away your emotions without you even realizing it. A smile can put someone at ease and convey warmth, while a furrowed brow can signal confusion or concern. When someone is talking to you, your facial expressions should align with what they're saying. If they're sharing something happy or exciting, a smile or raised eyebrows can show that you're engaged and happy for them. If the conversation takes a more serious turn, your facial expression should shift accordingly. Your face is one of the first things people read to understand how you feel about a conversation. Even things like your tone of voice and breathing patterns are part of your body language. The way you speak, whether it's fast and rushed or slow and deliberate, can signal your mood or level of engagement. If your voice is high-pitched and shaky, people might perceive you as nervous or uncertain. If you speak slowly and calmly, you'll likely come across as more confident and in control. Your breath, too, can communicate a lot about your emotions. If you're calm and collected, your breathing will be steady. But if you're stressed or anxious, your breath might become shallow or rapid. Be mindful of your tone and pace. They can help you convey a sense of calm and confidence. Body language also includes how you physically position yourself in a conversation. Proximity and personal space matter. If you stand too close to someone, they may feel uncomfortable, like you're invading their space. But if you stand too far away, you might seem distant or uninterested. Finding the right distance depends on the context and the relationship you have with the person, but generally speaking, respecting people's personal space shows that you care about their comfort. If you're aware of your body language, you can adjust it to make sure it matches your words and intentions. This helps others feel more at ease and creates a more authentic connection. And it's not just about looking confident or engaged. It's about truly being engaged in the conversation. If you're shifting around constantly, checking your phone, or looking at your watch, it sends the message that you'd rather be somewhere else. On the other hand, if you're giving the other person your full attention, your posture is open, you're making eye contact, your hands are relaxed, it shows that you value what they're saying. Being aware of your body language also means recognizing when someone else's body language isn't matching their words. If someone says, "I'm fine," but their arms are crossed or they're avoiding eye contact, it's a sign that they might not be fine after all. This is where active listening comes into play. By paying attention to both the words and body language of others, you can better understand what's really going on. If you notice signs of discomfort or tension, you might need to adjust the conversation or ask more questions to dig deeper. Mastering the art of body language isn't about being fake or over the top. It's about being intentional with your actions, making sure that your words and your body are working together to create a clear, open, and honest communication experience. It's about making sure the message you're sending is the one that's truly meant to be received. Small adjustments can make a big difference in how others perceive you and how you connect with them. By becoming more mindful of your body language, you can improve your communication skills and make every conversation more impactful. Chapter 4. Speaking clearly. Less is more when you think about communication. It's easy to assume that more words equal more clarity. But in reality, sometimes less is more. The ability to speak clearly with precision and purpose can be the key to making your point effectively. Overloading someone with too many words can confuse them or cause them to tune out, and that's not the kind of communication you want. What matters more than how much you say is how well you say it. We all know someone who talks a lot. Their sentences are long, they use multiple examples, and they keep going even when it's clear the listener isn't following. On the flip side, we also know people who can make their point in just a few words. They cut straight to the chase, they don't waste time, and they leave you with a clear understanding of their message. It's not that the talkative person doesn't have valuable things to say. They just haven't yet figured out how to say it effectively. The person who speaks succinctly, however, has mastered the skill of clear, impactful communication. One of the most effective ways to communicate is by getting to the point quickly. This doesn't mean you should rush through conversations or sound curt, but rather that you should be mindful of the message you want to deliver before you speak. Think about the core of what you want to convey. Strip away the extra words, the unnecessary filler, and get to the heart of the matter. The clearer you are, the more likely people are to understand your message and take it seriously. A big part of speaking clearly is being aware of your audience. It's easy to fall into the habit of speaking for the sake of speaking, especially when you're nervous or trying to impress someone. But the truth is, when you're speaking to others, you need to consider how they will interpret your message. What do they need to know? What information is relevant? And how can you say it in the simplest way possible? If you're giving a presentation at work or telling a story to a friend, your approach should be similar. Keep it simple and focused on the key points. No one wants to listen to a long-winded explanation or a rambling story. They want to know what's important and why it matters to them. So practice thinking before you speak. What's the essence of what you want to say? What's the main takeaway for the person you're talking to? A good practice is to imagine that you only have a few seconds to explain your point. What would you say if time was limited? The more you train yourself to simplify your thoughts and speak with clarity, the easier it becomes to communicate effectively in any situation. This isn't about dumbing things down. It's about finding the most straightforward way to communicate a message that people can easily grasp. Another important part of speaking clearly is avoiding unnecessary jargon. It's tempting to use big words or technical terms to make yourself sound more knowledgeable, but often this can backfire. Your goal is not to impress but to connect. When you use complicated language, it can create a barrier between you and the person you're speaking to, especially if they don't understand the terms you're using. Instead, choose words that everyone can understand, no matter their background or experience. The clearer you are, the more likely your listener will stay engaged and retain the information you're giving them. Have you ever been in a conversation where someone used terms you didn't understand, and you just nodded along, pretending to know what they were talking about? It's a common experience and it doesn't feel good. Now imagine the opposite. A person speaks to you in a way that is approachable, that uses language you can relate to. It feels comfortable and natural. That's the kind of communication that makes a real impact. The way you structure your thoughts also plays a huge role in clarity. When you're trying to get a message across, it's easy to get sidetracked by tangents or irrelevant details. To keep things clear, you need to organize your thoughts before you speak. If you have multiple points to make, try to present them in a logical order. Start with the most important idea and then build on it. Avoid jumping around from topic to topic, as this can confuse your listener and make it harder for them to follow what you're saying. For example, if you're telling a story, don't start with the ending. That's a sure way to lose your audience. Instead, begin with the setup. What's the context? Who's involved? What's at stake? Once you've established that, you can move into the events that unfold, and then finish with the conclusion. When you follow this structure, your listener can track your thoughts and understand where you're going with the conversation. Another strategy for clear communication is the power of pauses. We live in a fast-paced world, and many of us are in the habit of speaking quickly and filling silence with more words. But taking a moment to pause can actually make your words more impactful. A well-timed pause gives your listener a moment to process what you've just said. It also gives you a chance to collect your thoughts before continuing. Instead of rushing through your point, slow down, take a breath, and allow your words to sink in. Pauses also give you the opportunity to emphasize important points. If you've just said something significant, don't rush on to the next thought. Take a moment to let the importance of your words land. This not only gives your listener time to reflect on what you've said, but also shows that you value your message and want to make sure it's understood. Being clear doesn't mean you have to be overly formal. Communication is much more than just getting facts across. It's about building connections. The more natural and genuine you are, the more likely it is that your message will be received. So don't worry too much about perfecting every sentence. Instead, focus on delivering your thoughts in a way that is honest, direct, and relatable. Sometimes simplicity can be the hardest part. It's easy to overcomplicate things or get caught up in trying to sound impressive. But speaking clearly is about cutting through the noise and focusing on what really matters. The next time you're in a conversation, whether it's casual or important, think about how you can make your message as straightforward as possible. What can you take out? What's unnecessary? Clarity is not about saying everything you know. It's about saying exactly what needs to be said. One more thing to keep in mind is that speaking clearly also means speaking confidently. When you know what you're saying and you've organized your thoughts, you'll naturally feel more confident. And confidence has a huge impact on how your words are received. If you're unsure of yourself, your listener might also feel unsure. But if you speak with assurance, even if it's just by being clear and concise, your message will have more weight. The key to effective communication lies in understanding that less really is more. You don't have to say everything to get your point across. When you speak clearly with purpose and focus, you not only make it easier for others to understand you, but you also show respect for their time and attention. Whether you're having a casual conversation or delivering a serious message, the ability to speak with clarity can be the difference between being heard and being ignored. So the next time you speak, ask yourself, what's the main idea here? What's the simplest way to say it? When you start answering these questions, you'll find that communication becomes not only more effective, but also more enjoyable. Chapter 5. Handling tough talks without the drama. Chapter 5. Handling tough talks without the drama. Difficult conversations are a part of life. Whether you're dealing with a disagreement at work, A tough talk with a friend, or a challenging discussion with a loved one, these moments can be uncomfortable. And if handled poorly, they can quickly escalate into something more stressful than it needs to be. But the ability to manage tough conversations effectively is a skill that can transform relationships, both personally and professionally. It's not about avoiding difficult topics. It's about approaching them in a way that promotes understanding, respect, and resolution. The first thing to remember when you're facing a tough conversation is that your mindset matters. If you enter the conversation with the assumption that it's going to be an argument or that the other person will get defensive, it's almost guaranteed that things will go poorly. But if you go in with an open mind, willing to listen and willing to find common ground, the outcome can be very different. The way you frame the conversation in your mind is the first step in how it will unfold. Before you even start the conversation, take a moment to consider the perspective of the other person. What might they be feeling? Why are they reacting the way they are? We often approach tough conversations from our own point of view, assuming that we are right and the other person is wrong. But this can close us off from understanding the true issue. If you make an effort to approach the situation with empathy and an understanding of the other person's perspective, you can significantly reduce the tension and increase the chances of finding a solution. In any tough conversation, it's important to stay calm and composed. When emotions run high, it can be easy to raise your voice, interrupt, or say things you don't really mean. But reacting emotionally only fuels the fire. Instead, take a deep breath and make an effort to keep your emotions in check. If you feel yourself getting angry or upset, give yourself a moment to calm down before you respond. It's not about suppressing your feelings, but rather about taking control of how you express them. This helps keep the conversation from spiraling out of control. When it's time to speak, be clear about your intentions. What do you hope to achieve from this conversation? Are you trying to find a solution? Are you seeking understanding? Or simply expressing your feelings? By knowing what you want to accomplish, you can steer the conversation in the right direction and keep it productive. If you don't have a clear sense of your goals, you might find yourself talking in circles or going off topic. Stay focused on the key points and don't let the conversation drift into unnecessary areas. Another important strategy when managing tough conversations is avoiding blame and accusations. It's easy to fall into the trap of pointing fingers and accusing the other person of wrongdoing, but this only puts them on the defensive. Instead of saying, "You always do this," try to focus on how the situation makes you feel. For example, instead of accusing someone of being selfish, you could say, "I feel hurt when I'm not included in plans." By taking ownership of your feelings and framing the conversation in terms of your experiences, you make it easier for the other person to listen without feeling attacked. Use I statements instead of you statements. This simple shift in language makes a huge difference. When you say, "You never listen to me," it sounds accusatory and likely to make the other person feel defensive. But when you say, "I feel unheard when I try to talk," it expresses your feelings without attacking the other person. This approach fosters empathy and opens the door for a more productive discussion. Listening is equally important during difficult conversations. It's easy to get caught up in defending yourself or making your point, but true communication involves listening just as much as it involves speaking. Give the other person the space to express their feelings and really listen to what they're saying. This doesn't mean just hearing their words. It means understanding their perspective and acknowledging their emotions. Acknowledge what the other person is saying, even if you don't agree with them. You don't have to agree with everything to have a meaningful conversation, but acknowledging their feelings shows respect. Another key to managing tough conversations is staying solution-focused. It's easy to get stuck in the past and dwell on what went wrong, but this doesn't help anyone move forward. Instead of rehashing old arguments, focus on how you can move forward. What changes can you both make to improve the situation? What actions can be taken to prevent a similar issue from happening again? Keeping the conversation centered on solutions helps create a sense of progress and shows that you are both interested in resolving the issue rather than just airing grievances. If the conversation starts to escalate or become unproductive, don't be afraid to take a break. Sometimes, a short pause can help everyone collect their thoughts and calm down. This isn't about avoiding the issue. It's about creating the space needed for a more constructive discussion. It's okay to say, "I think we both need a few minutes to cool off before we continue." This shows that you are committed to resolving the issue, but you want to do it in a way that's calm and thoughtful. During difficult conversations, it's important to avoid personal attacks. Name-calling, insults, or belittling remarks will only escalate the situation and cause lasting damage to the relationship. Instead, focus on the specific issue at hand. Keep the conversation respectful, even if you're upset. By addressing the problem, not the person, you maintain a level of professionalism and emotional intelligence that allows both parties to stay calm and productive. Don't forget to acknowledge the other person's perspective, even if you don't agree with it. Showing that you understand where they're coming from doesn't mean you have to agree with them, but it creates an atmosphere of mutual respect. When people feel heard and understood, they're more likely to listen to your point of view and be open to compromise. When it comes to resolving the issue, be open to compromise. You might not get everything you want, and neither will the other person. But if you approach the conversation with a mindset of collaboration rather than confrontation, it becomes easier to find a middle ground. The goal isn't to win the argument, but to come to a solution that works for both sides. Sometimes that means making concessions and finding creative ways to meet each other's needs. Once the conversation is over, it's important to follow through on your promises. If you've agreed on a course of action or made commitments during the discussion, make sure you honor them. This builds trust and shows that you are serious about making positive changes. Following through is just as important as having the conversation in the first place because it proves that the conversation wasn't just words. It was a step toward improving the relationship. Difficult conversations don't have to be destructive. In fact, they can be an opportunity for growth, understanding, and connection. By staying calm, listening actively, and focusing on solutions, you can turn even the toughest talks into moments of progress. Every tough conversation is a chance to strengthen your communication skills and build stronger, more resilient relationships. It's about being open, honest, and willing to work through challenges together. When you approach these situations with the right mindset and the right tools, you'll find that they become easier to navigate and more productive in the long run. Chapter 6. Putting yourself in others' shoes. Empathy isn't just a nice-to-have skill in communication. It's a vital one. If you want to really connect with others, especially when you're dealing with difficult or complex situations, the ability to put yourself in someone else's shoes is invaluable. Understanding where someone is coming from, seeing things through their eyes, and truly hearing them can create a bond that fosters trust, respect, and better relationships. This isn't always easy, but when you learn how to do it effectively, it can transform the way you communicate and interact with others. When you think about empathy, it's more than just feeling bad when someone else is upset. It's about actively trying to understand their feelings, thoughts, and perspective, and responding in a way that acknowledges their experience. Sometimes it's not even about offering solutions. Sometimes it's about listening without judgment and allowing the other person to feel heard and validated. Empathy is not about agreeing with everything the other person says or does, but about understanding their emotions and viewpoints, even when they differ from your own. One of the first steps in being more empathetic is taking the time to listen. Not just listening to respond, but truly listening to understand. So often, when we're having a conversation, we're already thinking about what we're going to say next. We're so focused on crafting our response that we miss the full depth of what the other person is saying. This can lead to misunderstandings or frustration, because the other person may feel that they weren't really heard. Empathetic listening means giving the speaker your full attention, letting them express themselves without interruptions, and focusing entirely on their words. It's about being present in the moment and making the other person feel like their thoughts and feelings are important. When you listen with empathy, it's also crucial to pay attention to nonverbal cues. Sometimes what's left unsaid speaks louder than words. A person's tone of voice, body language, and facial expressions can tell you a lot about how they're feeling. Are they tense? Nervous? Frustrated? By noticing these cues, you can get a better sense of what the person may be experiencing internally, even if they're not directly saying it. This can help you respond in a way that is more attuned to their emotions and more supportive in nature. It's also important to ask questions that show you're genuinely interested in understanding their point of view. Don't make assumptions. Instead of jumping in with your own ideas or advice, try asking open-ended questions that encourage the person to share more. Questions like, "How did that make you feel?" Or "What was going through your mind when that happened?" Invite the person to open up and give you a deeper insight into their thoughts. These types of questions also help the other person feel valued because it shows that you care about their experience. Another way to practice empathy is by validating the other person's feelings. This doesn't mean you have to agree with them, but simply acknowledging their emotions can go a long way. For example, if someone is upset about something, saying something like, "I can see why you'd feel that way," or "That must be really tough for you," shows that you're recognizing their emotional state and not dismissing it. When someone feels validated, they're more likely to open up and continue the conversation in a productive way. It also helps to reduce the emotional tension that can arise in difficult discussions, because it creates a safe space where feelings are acknowledged instead of ignored or minimized. In some situations, people may not want you to fix their problems. They may just want to be heard, to feel understood. Offering advice too quickly can sometimes be counterproductive, especially if the other person just needs to vent or process their emotions. Instead of jumping straight into problem-solving mode, try simply acknowledging what they're saying and expressing understanding. You might say something like, "I can't imagine how hard that must be for you," or "That sounds really challenging." This allows the person to feel supported without immediately feeling the pressure of having to fix the situation. Empathy also requires a degree of patience. Not everyone is going to open up right away, and sometimes people need time to express themselves. They might not have the right words, or they might be afraid of being judged. By giving them the space they need and showing that you're willing to listen without rushing them, you help build a sense of trust. Patience also helps you avoid jumping to conclusions or reacting too quickly. Often, people just need a moment to articulate their feelings, and with empathy, you can be the person who helps them feel comfortable doing that. There are times, of course, when empathy can be challenging. If you're dealing with someone who is angry, defensive, or upset, it can be easy to slip into a defensive mode yourself. But responding to anger with more anger or defensiveness will only escalate the situation. Instead, try to remain calm, acknowledge their emotions, and let them know that you're open to understanding what's behind their frustration. This can help de-escalate the situation and create a more constructive dialogue. By keeping your own emotions in check and responding with empathy, you're setting the tone for a more positive interaction, even when things get tough. Empathy doesn't only apply to difficult conversations, though. It can also enhance everyday interactions. The ability to show empathy in casual conversations can strengthen your relationships, whether you're talking to a colleague, a friend, or a family member. For example, if a friend shares something exciting with you, showing enthusiasm and joy for their success is a form of empathy. On the other hand, if they share something difficult, offering a kind word or simply being there to listen can make a world of difference. The more you practice empathy in everyday interactions, the more natural it will become to bring that same level of understanding and connection into your tougher conversations. When you take the time to understand others, you also begin to understand yourself more. Empathy helps you become more aware of your own feelings and reactions, which can lead to deeper self-awareness. It can also improve your ability to communicate your own needs and emotions, since you've practiced articulating feelings in a way that respects both your own and others' experiences. At its core, empathy is about recognizing the humanity in others. It's about understanding that everyone is dealing with their own challenges, fears, and emotions. When you practice empathy, you're making a conscious effort to connect with others in a way that is compassionate and understanding. In return, you not only strengthen your relationships but also build a reputation as someone who values and respects the feelings of those around them. The more you practice empathy, the more naturally it will become a part of your communication. You'll start to notice the subtle cues people give off, the emotions that lie beneath their words, and the deeper meaning behind their actions. By being attentive, patient, and open to understanding, you'll find that your relationships become more meaningful and your ability to communicate improves. Empathy is a powerful tool that has the potential to transform how you connect with others and ultimately, to build stronger, more positive relationships in every area of your life. Chapter 7. Practice makes perfect. Improving every day. Improving communication is a gradual process, and one that requires ongoing effort. You're not going to suddenly become an expert communicator overnight. But the good news is, with consistent practice, you can make meaningful progress. This is why daily effort is so important. Just like anything in life, the more you practice, the better you get. Communication is no different. It's easy to think that you've got it all figured out after a few successful interactions. But the truth is, the best communicators are always refining their skills. It's easy to fall into a routine where you don't actively think about your communication. You get comfortable, and before you know it, you're back to your old habits. Interrupting others, speaking too fast, not listening, or letting emotions take control. To break free from this, you need to make a conscious effort every day. It's not enough to expect improvement just by hoping for it. The key is to integrate small practices into your day-to-day interactions so that it becomes second nature. One powerful way to improve your communication skills is by taking time every day to listen. It sounds simple, but this is often overlooked. We're constantly distracted by our phones, emails, and other external noise, so we don't always give people the attention they deserve when they're speaking to us. To truly improve, you need to commit to really listening in every conversation. This means giving your full attention, putting down your phone, and tuning out distractions. The more you focus on the person in front of you, the more you'll understand their message, and the more effectively you'll be able to respond. A daily habit of practicing active listening can make a huge difference. Active listening involves not just hearing the words, but understanding the feelings and ideas behind them. It's about engaging with the speaker, asking clarifying questions when you're unsure, and reflecting back what you've heard to make sure you've understood correctly. By practicing active listening every day, you'll start to notice patterns in the way people communicate. You'll be better at recognizing emotions and intentions, which will make you more effective in responding. Another essential part of improving communication is being mindful of your body language. It's not just about what you say, but how you say it. Your posture, eye contact, facial expressions, and gestures all convey important messages that can either support or contradict your words. If you're speaking in a confident tone but avoiding eye contact or crossing your arms, it sends mixed signals. Your body language should align with the message you're trying to communicate. Over time, becoming more aware of how your body communicates can help you build stronger connections with others and make your conversations more impactful. One way to practice this is by recording yourself during conversations or presentations. You can do this when you're speaking to a friend, a colleague, or even in a mirror. Watching yourself communicate will give you insights into your body language and how you come across to others. You might realize you fidget or avoid eye contact without even knowing it. Once you identify these habits, you can start working to improve them. The more you become aware of your nonverbal cues, the more confident and authentic your communication will be. Another key element of improvement is gaining feedback from others. The people around you, friends, family, colleagues, can be valuable sources of insight into your communication style. Sometimes we don't realize our own communication flaws because we're too close to the situation. Asking for feedback can help you identify areas for improvement that you might not notice on your own. It could be something as simple as the tone you use when you're stressed or how you interrupt people without meaning to. Ask others for honest input on how you come across in conversations, and use their feedback to refine your skills. It's also helpful to set small goals for yourself when practicing communication. Instead of trying to overhaul everything at once, focus on one aspect of communication at a time. For example, you might decide to work on listening more intently during your meetings at work. Or you could commit to speaking more slowly when you're explaining something important. By narrowing your focus, you can see clear improvements more quickly, which can help motivate you to keep going. Celebrate the small victories, like staying calm in a heated discussion, or actively listening during a conversation with a colleague. One of the best ways to improve is by reading and learning about communication. The more you understand the principles behind effective communication, the more conscious you will be of the choices you make when interacting with others. There are countless books, articles, and podcasts out there that focus on communication skills. Reading about different strategies and techniques can provide you with new ideas to try. It can also help you develop a deeper understanding of why people communicate the way they do, which will make you more empathetic and adaptable in your own interactions. Every time you engage with someone, it's an opportunity to practice and refine your communication skills. The more you put them into action, the more naturally they'll come. Communication doesn't just happen when you're having a big conversation. It's a part of everything you do. Whether you're sending a quick text, giving a presentation, or catching up with a friend, each moment is an opportunity to practice. Over time, you'll develop the confidence and skills to handle all sorts of conversations with ease. To keep yourself on track, review your progress regularly. At the end of each day, take a moment to think about the conversations you had and how you could have communicated more effectively. Were there moments when you could have listened better or been more mindful of your tone? Were there areas where you felt like you could have been clearer in expressing your ideas? Reflecting on your daily interactions helps you identify areas for improvement and make small adjustments for the future. The more you review your progress, the faster you'll grow as a communicator. Remember, improvement doesn't always happen in leaps and bounds. Sometimes it's a matter of small, consistent changes that accumulate over time. You may not see huge changes right away, but every day you put in the effort, you're making progress. Just like working out, it's the steady, consistent effort that pays off in the long run. So don't get discouraged if you don't notice drastic changes immediately. Keep practicing, stay patient with yourself, and trust that the work you put in today will pay off tomorrow. The journey to better communication is a lifelong process. It's not something you can master and then stop practicing. The best communicators continue to learn, grow, and refine their skills throughout their lives. So make it a daily habit. Engage fully in every conversation. Listen attentively. Be mindful of how you're presenting yourself, and continue seeking feedback from those around you. Over time, these small efforts will add up and make you a more confident, effective communicator. And when you communicate better, you'll notice that your relationships, both personal and professional, will grow stronger and more meaningful as a result. Chapter 8. Be yourself. Authentic communication wins. When it comes to communication, one of the most powerful things you can do is be yourself. Authenticity is key. If you're trying to communicate in a way that feels forced or doesn't align with who you are, people can sense that. And when they do, it creates a disconnect. Whether you're speaking with friends, family, coworkers, or even strangers, the more authentic you are, the more effective your communication will be. It's that simple. But being yourself isn't always easy, especially when you feel pressure to fit in or to present a certain image. It's natural to want to impress others, to speak in a way that makes you seem smarter or more put together, or to sound like someone you admire. But trying to be someone else or pretending to know more than you do only leads to confusion and a lack of genuine connection. It's not sustainable. If you want your conversations to be meaningful, they need to be real. They need to come from a place of honesty and openness. Authenticity in communication isn't just about being true to yourself. It's about being vulnerable. Being real means showing up as you are, flaws and all, without trying to hide behind a facade. It's okay to admit when you don't know something, or when you're confused. It's okay to express uncertainty or to ask questions. In fact, people often appreciate it when you're willing to be vulnerable and admit your limitations. It makes you more relatable. When you're authentic, you're giving others the permission to be authentic too. You create a space for openness and honesty that allows for deeper, more genuine connections. In the process of becoming more authentic, it's important to acknowledge the difference between being yourself and being selfish. Authentic communication doesn't mean saying whatever comes to mind without consideration for the other person's feelings. It's about sharing your thoughts and feelings honestly, but in a way that respects others. Being yourself doesn't mean disregarding someone else's perspective or dominating the conversation. It means expressing yourself in a way that is clear, respectful, and considerate. Communication is a two-way street. The goal isn't just to express your own thoughts, but also to listen and understand the other person's. Being authentic also involves being transparent. You don't have to hide your intentions, your beliefs, or your values. When you speak from a place of honesty, your words carry more weight. People trust you more when they know you're being straight with them. This doesn't mean that you should say everything that comes to your mind. Sometimes discretion is necessary, but it does mean being true to your feelings and thoughts. If you're feeling frustrated or excited, let that show. If you're uncertain, say so. Let your emotions inform your communication in a way that feels natural and real. You may find that at first, being truly authentic feels uncomfortable. It can feel risky, especially if you're used to filtering yourself or putting on a certain persona. But over time, the more you practice being authentic, the more comfortable it will become. When you start speaking in a way that is true to who you are, your confidence grows. And the more you communicate from a place of authenticity, the easier it becomes to build trust with others. People will start to appreciate your honesty and clarity. They'll feel like they know the real you, and that connection will deepen. One of the most significant benefits of authentic communication is that it leads to stronger relationships. When you communicate in a way that is open and genuine, it invites others to do the same. You create a dynamic where both parties feel free to express themselves without fear of judgment. It makes conversations more comfortable, more natural, and more meaningful. Whether you're talking to a friend, a romantic partner, or a colleague, authenticity fosters an environment where both people feel heard, understood, and valued. Sometimes, though, you might worry that being too authentic could make you vulnerable or expose you to judgment. This fear is natural, but the truth is, people are often more accepting than we give them credit for. Being authentic doesn't mean being overly blunt or sharing every thought that crosses your mind. It's about showing up as you are in a way that feels genuine and respectful. When you show up as your authentic self, you're actually allowing others the space to do the same. Vulnerability can lead to deeper connection, not less. It shows that you trust the other person and value the relationship enough to be real with them. There's also the idea that authenticity comes with a certain courage. It's not always easy to speak your truth, especially if it goes against the norm or if you fear judgment. But the more you practice being yourself, the more natural it becomes. It takes courage to share your thoughts, especially when you're unsure of how they will be received. But once you realize that true connection comes from honesty and openness, it becomes easier to embrace that courage. The strength you gain from being true to yourself is unmatched. It's liberating to know that you don't have to hide parts of yourself in order to connect with others. Authentic communication also means understanding your values and communicating them clearly. When you understand what matters to you, you can communicate more effectively because you won't be swayed by outside pressures. Knowing your own values gives you clarity in conversations and helps you avoid getting lost in others' expectations. It's about standing firm in what you believe, while also being open to hearing and understanding others' perspectives. When you're grounded in your values, your communication has direction, and it's easier to communicate with integrity. Being yourself also helps you stay consistent in your communication. When you're authentic, there's no need for confusion. You're not pretending to be someone you're not, so your words match your actions. This creates consistency, and consistency builds trust. People can rely on you to be the same person every time they interact with you. This reliability strengthens relationships, whether it's in your personal life or at work. At the same time, there's a balance to be found. You can be authentic without being abrasive. Being yourself doesn't mean disregarding the social context or ignoring the feelings of others. It's about being aware of the situation and adapting when necessary. Sometimes being authentic means showing restraint or being tactful. It doesn't mean you say everything on your mind, but it does mean that what you do say is true to who you are and aligned with your values. The more authentic you are, the easier it will be to have meaningful conversations. People will respect you more because you're not putting on an act, and they'll feel more comfortable around you. This fosters a deeper level of trust and connection, and in turn, it leads to better communication because both sides are coming to the table with a sense of openness and honesty. Over time, you'll see that when you communicate from a place of authenticity, the rewards are clear. You'll build stronger, more genuine relationships with others. Your conversations will be more fulfilling because they'll be rooted in truth. And most importantly, you'll feel a sense of peace because you know you're being true to yourself and to those around you. Authenticity in communication doesn't just make you a better communicator. It makes you a better person too. Chapter 9. Speaking with confidence, not arrogance when you're in a conversation. How you present yourself speaks just as loudly as the words you say. Confidence in communication isn't about being the loudest person in the room or dominating the conversation. It's not about pretending you know everything or coming across as an expert when you're not. True confidence in communication comes from being clear, composed, and comfortable with what you're saying. It's about owning your words and your message without overcompensating or feeling the need to impress. A confident communicator doesn't fumble through their thoughts or try to hide uncertainty. They embrace their ideas and express them clearly. The key to speaking with confidence is knowing that your thoughts and opinions are valid, even if they don't align with others. Confidence comes from within. It's an inner belief in your ability to communicate effectively, regardless of the situation. Whether you're speaking to a friend, a colleague, or an audience, you need to believe that what you have to say matters. One of the easiest ways to convey confidence is through your tone of voice. The way you say something can completely change how it's received. If you speak too quickly or with hesitation, it can make you seem uncertain. But when you speak slowly with purpose and clarity, your words carry more weight. You don't have to shout or over-exaggerate, but a calm, steady tone can go a long way in conveying confidence. Pay attention to how you speak. Are you rushing through your sentences? Are you soft-spoken to the point of being hard to hear? Practice speaking in a clear, controlled voice that reflects confidence without sounding forced. Body language is another crucial part of confident communication. If you're speaking with your arms crossed or looking at the floor, you're sending a message of uncertainty or disinterest. Confident people stand tall, make eye contact, and use gestures to emphasize their points. Even small things like uncrossing your arms or leaning slightly forward can make a big difference in how your message is received. When you're confident, you're more likely to engage with others. You'll notice that people are more likely to respond positively when you're open, approachable, and present in the moment. Another element of confidence is not being afraid to pause. It's easy to fill every silence with words, but sometimes taking a moment to pause can show that you're composed and in control. Pauses allow you to collect your thoughts, emphasize a point, or simply give your listener time to absorb what you've said. A well-timed pause can create a sense of anticipation, drawing people in and making them pay closer attention to your words. Don't be afraid of a little silence. Sometimes it's the most powerful part of a conversation. The way you prepare for conversations can also affect your confidence. If you know you're going into a discussion where you'll need to present ideas or address a difficult topic, preparation is key. Think about what you want to say ahead of time, and try to anticipate any questions or objections that might come up. This doesn't mean you need to script every word, but having a general sense of the direction you want the conversation to take will make you feel more at ease. The more prepared you are, the more confidently you can speak, knowing that you're not caught off guard by what's being said. Confidence doesn't come from pretending to be perfect or always having the right answer. It comes from accepting that mistakes happen and being okay with them. When you make a mistake or say something wrong, it's okay to admit it. A confident communicator doesn't crumble under pressure. They acknowledge their mistakes and move forward. This ability to accept imperfection actually makes you more relatable and trustworthy. People appreciate someone who is genuine and willing to admit when they're wrong, rather than someone who tries to cover up mistakes or deny them. When you speak with confidence, you naturally build credibility. People are more likely to trust you and take you seriously when you speak in a calm, assured manner. You might not always be the most knowledgeable person in the room, but when you communicate with confidence, people will listen. Confidence in communication is about trusting your own voice and allowing your message to be heard. Whether you're sharing an opinion or providing information, confidence helps others believe in your ideas. There's also the idea of finding your authentic voice. This is a huge part of speaking confidently. You might think of confidence as something that comes from mimicking others, maybe a colleague who always speaks with authority or a public figure who never seems nervous. But the truth is, real confidence comes when you stop trying to imitate someone else and just embrace your own style. Your voice is unique to you, and that's where your true confidence lies. When you speak in a way that feels natural to you, your confidence will shine through, and your message will resonate more. Sometimes people get the idea that confidence means being assertive all the time, always pushing your ideas, always standing your ground. But confident communication doesn't mean being aggressive or domineering. It's about assertiveness without aggression. Knowing what you want to say and expressing it clearly while still respecting others' viewpoints. It's about stating your thoughts with assurance without overpowering others in the conversation. Confidence isn't about winning an argument or proving someone else wrong. It's about expressing your thoughts with clarity and conviction, while still being open to dialogue. If you struggle with confidence in certain situations, such as public speaking or giving presentations, you can improve over time by practicing. Start small. Whether it's speaking up in a meeting or voicing your opinion in a casual conversation, gradually, these small acts of speaking confidently will build up, and you'll notice that you're more comfortable in higher-stakes situations as well. Public speaking, for example, is something most people find intimidating at first, but it becomes easier with repetition. The more you put yourself in situations where you need to speak, the more your confidence will grow. You can also work on confidence in nonverbal communication. Much of how you communicate is not through your words but through your body language, facial expressions, and the energy you bring to the room. Even the way you walk into a room or how you make eye contact can communicate confidence. It's not just about what you say. It's about how you present yourself. The more you are mindful of these nonverbal cues, the more confident you'll appear to others, which in turn will make you feel more confident inside. Confidence in communication isn't something that comes automatically for everyone, and it's not something that can be forced. But the more you practice, the easier it becomes. Confidence grows with each interaction. It comes from feeling comfortable in your own skin and embracing your own voice. It's about trusting that what you have to say matters, and that you deserve to be heard. You don't have to be the loudest person in the room or the one who has all the answers. True confidence comes from owning your words, expressing them clearly, and allowing others to hear your thoughts without fear or hesitation. Over time, as you continue to practice confident communication, you'll start to see it transform your relationships, both personally and professionally. People will respond to you differently when they sense your confidence. You'll be able to navigate tough conversations with ease, express your ideas more clearly, and connect with others on a deeper level. Confidence, when expressed authentically, becomes a powerful tool for creating stronger, more meaningful connections. And the more confident you are in your ability to communicate, the more you'll see your life and relationships thrive. Chapter 10. Communicating in the digital world. Communication in the digital world is a whole different ballgame. Gone are the days when face-to-face conversations were the norm. Today, much of our communication happens through text messages, emails, social media posts, and even video calls. While these platforms offer us incredible opportunities to connect with others, they also come with their own set of challenges. Understanding how to communicate effectively in this digital space is essential, and it requires a shift in mindset and approach. One of the biggest differences between in-person communication and digital communication is the lack of nonverbal cues. In face-to-face interactions, we rely on body language, facial expressions, and tone of voice to gauge how someone is feeling or what they truly mean. In digital communication, all of that is stripped away. A simple message or email can be misinterpreted because there's no way to tell if the other person is smiling, laughing, or rolling their eyes. This can lead to misunderstandings, conflicts, and frustration, especially when the tone or intent behind a message isn't clear. The key to effective communication in the digital world is to be extra careful with your words. Without the benefit of facial expressions or body language, the way you phrase things becomes even more important. What might come across as casual or lighthearted in person can sound rude or dismissive in a text or email. This is why it's so important to think about the tone of your messages before hitting send. Ask yourself, how might this be received by the person on the other end? Am I being clear and respectful? Do my words reflect my true intent? Taking a moment to reflect on your message before sending it can save you from unnecessary misunderstandings. It's also easy to forget that digital communication doesn't allow for the same back-and-forth rhythm that in-person conversations do. When you're having a conversation face-to-face, there's a natural flow. You speak, they respond, and the back-and-forth continues. In the digital world, however, especially when you're dealing with emails or text messages, there's often a delay. This can lead to frustration, especially if you're waiting for a response or if the other person takes a long time to reply. One of the most important things you can do is be patient and understanding. Remember that the other person might not be sitting right in front of their phone or computer, and their response might take a little longer than you'd like. In addition to patience, clarity is paramount in digital communication. Without the opportunity to ask questions on the spot or clarify misunderstandings immediately, it's easy for your message to get lost in translation. Be as clear and concise as possible, and avoid overcomplicating things. It's tempting to include lots of details or explanations, but the more you write, the more potential there is for confusion. Stick to the main points and ensure that your message is easy to understand. If you're making a request or giving instructions, break things down step by step to avoid any ambiguity. Another challenge with digital communication is the risk of misinterpretation. When you don't have the full range of vocal tone and body language to support your message, it's easy for someone to misread your words. For example, a short, blunt message can come across as rude or impatient, even if that wasn't your intention. Emojis, GIFs, and punctuation marks can help convey tone, but they can't always capture the full meaning. If you're ever in doubt, it's worth considering whether a phone call or video chat might be a better option for a more sensitive or important conversation. Sometimes it's easier to understand someone's tone or intent when you can hear their voice or see their face. The digital world also creates an environment where communication is often asynchronous. In other words, you may not always be communicating in real time, and that can create problems, especially when you're trying to coordinate with others. For example, in a work setting, emails or project management platforms might not provide instant responses, which can slow things down. It's essential to manage expectations in this space. If you need an immediate response, make sure to note that in your message. Use phrases like, "Please reply as soon as possible," or "Looking forward to your response today." Conversely, if you don't need an immediate reply, let the other person know that they can take their time to respond. Context plays a significant role in digital communication, and without it, things can get easily misunderstood. When you're sending a message or email, be aware of the context in which you're communicating. Are you responding to a work email? Are you having a casual chat with a friend? The context will dictate the tone and level of formality your message should have. A message to a colleague might require a more formal tone, while a text to a close friend can be more relaxed and informal. Misjudging the tone of your message based on context can lead to awkward situations or confusion. In professional settings, it's often better to err on the side of caution and use a more formal tone. In personal settings, you can be more informal, but even then, consider how your words might be received. One major advantage of digital communication, though, is that it gives you time to think. In a face-to-face conversation, you often have to respond quickly, which can sometimes lead to missteps or regrets. In digital communication, you have the luxury of taking a moment to consider your response. If you're feeling emotional, it can be helpful to step away for a while before responding to an email or text message. This pause gives you the chance to think more clearly and respond in a way that you won't regret later. It's also important to take your time to process information before replying. If you're reading a message that triggers an emotional reaction, give yourself permission to pause and reflect before firing back a response. Timing is also crucial in the digital world. Some messages are time-sensitive, and responding in a timely manner can prevent unnecessary delays or complications. In work settings, for instance, delayed responses can slow down progress and create frustration. On the other hand, in more casual or personal conversations, waiting a little longer to respond may be perfectly fine. However, regardless of the situation, it's always respectful to acknowledge receipt of a message, especially if you need more time to respond thoughtfully. A simple, "Got your message, I'll get back to you soon," can go a long way in letting the other person know that you haven't ignored them. Another key aspect of digital communication is setting boundaries. Since we're always connected, whether through our phones, computers, or other devices, it can be easy to feel like we have to be available 24/7. But that's not realistic, and it's important to set boundaries to protect your time and mental health. Be clear with others about when you're available to respond and when you're not. If you don't want to be bombarded with messages late at night or on weekends, let people know. Setting these boundaries helps you maintain control over your time and allows you to engage in digital communication without feeling overwhelmed. At the same time, digital communication can create opportunities for stronger relationships. Being able to reach out to someone at any time, whether through a quick text or a message on social media, allows us to maintain connections with people who may live far away or whom we don't see often. Digital platforms can keep relationships alive in ways that weren't possible in the past. However, the key is to remain intentional with how you communicate. Even though you're using digital tools, the goal should always be to foster genuine, meaningful connections. Whether you're texting a friend, responding to an email, or engaging on social media, the way you communicate should still reflect the values of kindness, respect, and authenticity. Ultimately, successful communication in the digital world is about being mindful of how you present yourself through your words. Whether you're Chapter 11, reading between the lines when you communicate with someone, what they say is only part of the story. It's just as important to listen to what's not being said, the things hidden beneath the surface between the words. This is where reading between the lines comes in. It's about tuning into the subtle signals that others give you. Their body language, tone of voice, facial expressions, and even the pauses in conversation. These cues tell you things that words alone cannot express, and understanding them can dramatically improve your communication. People don't always say exactly what they mean. They might be too afraid to speak up, unsure of how to express themselves, or even trying to protect someone else's feelings. In these moments, you need to be a little detective. It's about being observant and sensitive to the underlying emotions, motives, and intentions that lie behind someone's words. This doesn't mean jumping to conclusions or reading too much into things, but rather looking for signs that can help you better understand where the other person is coming from. For instance, imagine you're having a conversation with a coworker about a project that's behind schedule. On the surface, they might simply say, "We're working on it, but there are some delays." You could take that at face value and move on. But if you pay attention, you might notice that they're avoiding eye contact, speaking quickly, or fidgeting nervously. These small physical cues suggest that something deeper might be going on. Maybe they're frustrated or worried but don't want to admit it. By noticing these signs, you can adjust your response, asking more thoughtful follow-up questions or offering support in a way that addresses their real concerns. Reading between the lines can also help you detect hidden emotions. Sometimes people say one thing but feel something entirely different. A person might tell you they're fine when they're clearly upset, or they might agree to something even though you can tell they're not completely on board. These moments require you to read between the lines and recognize that their words are just the surface. How they say it, the hesitation in their voice, the way their eyes dart around, the tightness in their posture, could reveal that they're not being fully open. By picking up on these signals, you can approach the situation with more empathy and understanding. Tone of voice is an especially powerful tool when it comes to reading between the lines. The same words can convey completely different meanings depending on how they're said. A simple phrase like, "I'm not angry," can have a very different impact depending on whether it's said with a calm, soothing voice or with a sharp, defensive tone. Often, the emotion behind the words is in the tone itself, not the content of the sentence. This is why it's so important to listen with not only your ears but your whole body. You can tell when someone's tone doesn't match their words, and that's your clue that there's more going on than meets the eye. Another important thing to consider when reading between the lines is context. What's going on in the person's life or the situation around them? Context plays a huge role in how we communicate. Someone who is stressed at work or dealing with personal issues may not communicate as clearly or effectively as they normally would. They might seem distracted, curt, or even short-tempered. But if you're aware of the context, you can interpret their words with more understanding. Instead of taking their frustration personally, you can see it for what it likely is: stress manifesting in their communication. Understanding the bigger picture allows you to approach these situations with more patience and compassion. People also communicate through their silences, which are just as revealing as their words. A long pause in a conversation often means that someone is thinking carefully about their response, weighing their options, or perhaps even trying to gather the courage to say something they're unsure about. In some cases, silence might also indicate discomfort, confusion, or a desire to avoid a topic. When there's a pause, it's easy to jump in with your own response. But if you wait a moment, you might discover that the person is still processing their thoughts. This can create an opening for a deeper, more meaningful conversation. The key to reading between the lines is patience and empathy. You need to be willing to go beyond surface-level conversation and pay attention to what's happening around the words. People don't always know how to express their feelings or what's going on in their minds, and that's where you come in. By being sensitive to these cues, you can gain deeper insights into their emotional state and respond in a way that's thoughtful and supportive. In a professional setting, being able to read between the lines is essential for effective teamwork and leadership. If you're a manager, for example, picking up on subtle signals from your employees can help you understand their concerns, even if they're not expressing them directly. If an employee seems distracted or stressed but isn't vocal about it, recognizing that can prompt you to offer assistance or check in with them. It shows that you care about more than just the work they produce. You care about their well-being. By doing this, you build trust and create an environment where people feel comfortable opening up when they need support. But reading between the lines isn't just for professional settings. It's also crucial in personal relationships. In your interactions with family and friends, being able to pick up on subtle clues can deepen your understanding of their emotional world. For example, a friend who is always upbeat and positive might suddenly seem withdrawn or quiet. On the surface, they may say everything is fine, but by noticing their change in energy, you can ask more gently, "Is everything okay? You seem a little off today." This not only shows that you're paying attention, but it also offers them a chance to share their thoughts and feelings, even if they're hesitant to do so. Being sensitive to the subtext of conversations also involves being aware of your own actions. Sometimes we interpret others' words through the lens of our own emotions and biases. If you're feeling anxious or defensive, you might read a neutral comment as critical or dismissive. This is why it's so important to stay grounded and try to separate your emotional state from the conversation. When you're calm and open, you're more likely to see the situation clearly and understand the other person's true intent. To be effective at reading between the lines, you have to cultivate a certain level of awareness. Awareness of the person you're speaking to, their body language, tone, and the context of the conversation. Awareness of your own emotions and biases, and above all, awareness of the importance of being a good listener, not just to the words, but to everything else going on around them. When you read between the lines, you don't just listen to what someone is saying, you listen to what they're not saying. You notice the things they might not even realize they're revealing through their body language, silence, and tone. And with that understanding, you can communicate in a way that's more thoughtful, compassionate, and aligned with their true needs. Chapter 12. Giving feedback that helps. When it comes to giving feedback, many people approach it with a sense of trepidation. No one likes to feel criticized, and no one enjoys delivering negative feedback either. But the reality is, feedback, when delivered correctly, can be one of the most powerful tools for growth, improvement, and stronger relationships. The challenge is learning how to give feedback in a way that is constructive, helpful, and promotes positive change without causing defensiveness or discouragement. The first thing to understand about giving effective feedback is that it's not about the person, it's about the behavior or the action. When feedback is given as a judgment of someone's character, it often leads to hurt feelings and resistance. However, when it focuses on actions or outcomes, it's easier for the person receiving the feedback to see it as something they can change or improve. For example, instead of saying, "You're always late," which might feel like an attack on someone's character, it's better to say, "I've noticed you've been coming in after the start of the meeting recently. Is there something going on that we can address?" This shifts the conversation from being about the person's flaws to addressing a specific behavior that can be improved. Clarity and specificity are key. Feedback that is vague or general is often unhelpful. If someone doesn't know exactly what they did wrong, or what they could do differently, they can't take meaningful steps to improve. Instead of saying something like, "Your work needs improvement," try to give clear, actionable advice. The report you submitted had several sections that were unclear, and there were some important details missing. Next time, it might help to double-check the data and make sure all relevant information is included. When feedback is clear, the person receiving it knows exactly what needs to be done to make improvements, and they feel empowered to take action. Another important element of effective feedback is timeliness. The sooner you give feedback, the more likely it is to be helpful. If too much time passes between an event and the feedback, the person may not remember the situation clearly, or it may feel disconnected from the issue at hand. In some cases, waiting too long can make the feedback feel like a criticism rather than a constructive tool for improvement. For example, if an employee gives a presentation with a few mistakes, providing feedback immediately after the presentation allows them to correct the issues and apply the feedback in real time. If you wait until a week later, the impact of the feedback diminishes, and they may struggle to make the connection between the feedback and the specific behavior. Feedback should also be balanced. This doesn't mean giving someone praise just to soften the blow of criticism, but it does mean making sure to highlight the things that were done well in addition to pointing out areas for improvement. This creates a more supportive atmosphere where the person receiving feedback feels acknowledged for their strengths, rather than feeling like they're only being criticized. A simple structure like the sandwich method, where you begin with positive feedback, then discuss areas for improvement, and end with something encouraging, can be very effective. However, be careful not to use this approach in a way that feels formulaic or insincere. The goal is to make the feedback balanced and constructive, not just to sugarcoat the criticism. One of the most important aspects of feedback is ensuring it's actionable. It's easy to say, "You need to improve your communication skills," but it's much more helpful to say, "It would be great if you could speak more slowly in meetings and make sure to summarize key points to help everyone follow along." This type of feedback gives the person clear steps they can take to make improvements. The more specific you can be about what they need to change and how they can go about doing it, the more likely they are to make those changes successfully. But giving feedback isn't just about the words you use. It's also about how you say them. Your tone, body language, and overall approach play a huge role in how feedback is received. If your body language is defensive or your tone is condescending, the person on the receiving end will likely become defensive themselves, and the conversation will not be productive. It's essential to approach feedback with a spirit of collaboration, not confrontation. Make sure you're conveying that your intent is to help them improve and grow, not to criticize or punish. A calm, friendly tone combined with open body language can make a huge difference in how feedback is received. In some cases, especially when the feedback is more personal or sensitive, it's important to have a safe space for the conversation. Giving feedback in public can sometimes cause embarrassment, leading the person to shut down or react negatively. Instead, try to create an environment where the person feels comfortable discussing the feedback without fear of judgment. Whether it's a private meeting, a one-on-one conversation, or a more informal chat, ensuring that the setting feels safe and supportive will make it easier for the other person to accept and act on your feedback. When receiving feedback, how you react is just as important as how the other person delivers it. No matter how constructive the feedback may be, it's natural to feel defensive, embarrassed, or even upset. But it's important to remember that feedback is an opportunity to learn and grow, not an attack. It's helpful to take a moment to listen, ask clarifying questions if necessary, and really understand what the other person is saying before reacting. If you need time to process the feedback, it's okay to ask for it. Responding calmly and thoughtfully shows that you're open to improvement and committed to making the necessary changes. Feedback isn't just for problems. It's also for praise and encouragement. It's easy to forget that positive feedback is just as important as negative feedback. In fact, people often respond even better to positive reinforcement than to criticism. When you recognize and acknowledge someone's efforts or successes, it motivates them to continue performing at a high level. So if you see someone doing something well, don't be shy about giving them feedback that highlights their strengths. A little encouragement goes a long way in building confidence and trust. Ultimately, the goal of feedback is to create a culture of growth and mutual respect. When feedback is given in a way that is specific, timely, actionable, and delivered with empathy, it fosters an environment where people feel comfortable learning from their mistakes, building on their strengths, and improving their performance. This creates an atmosphere of trust and collaboration where everyone can thrive. By focusing on both the positives and areas for improvement, feedback can become a powerful tool for continuous development and stronger relationships, whether at work, at home, or in any other area of life. Chapter 13. Telling stories. People remember telling stories has always been a powerful way to connect with people. Since the beginning of human history, we've communicated through stories, whether through word of mouth, written records, or now through digital platforms. Stories are compelling because they engage us emotionally. They capture our attention, and they make complex ideas easier to understand. When we share a story, we allow others to see the world through our eyes, to feel what we felt, and to experience something that may be new or unfamiliar to them. The art of telling stories that people remember isn't something reserved for professional speakers, writers, or marketers. It's something that each of us can develop and use in everyday conversations. Whether we're sharing an experience with a friend, telling a colleague about a project, or trying to motivate a team, stories can make all the difference. But it's not just about the content of the story. It's about how we tell it. A well-crafted story can turn a mundane message into something memorable. At the heart of any great story is an element of relatability. People remember stories that resonate with them personally. If you're sharing a story, think about who your audience is and how they might relate to the experiences you're talking about. What challenges have they faced that are similar to the ones in your story? What emotions are they likely to feel based on the situation? The more you can tap into the emotions, struggles, and desires of the people you're speaking to, the more likely your story will stick with them. But relatability alone isn't enough. Structure is key. Every good story has a beginning, middle, and end. Without these, a story can feel aimless or disjointed. In the beginning, you want to introduce the characters or the situation. You want to set the scene and give the audience enough context to understand what's at stake. The middle of the story is where the conflict or challenge arises. This is where things get interesting, where the audience starts to feel the tension. The resolution comes at the end, where the challenge is resolved in some way, and the audience is left with a sense of closure or insight. Without this structure, stories can feel incomplete or unsatisfying. A lot of people are afraid to tell stories because they think they need to be perfect or dramatic to capture attention. But the best stories often come from the simplest, most genuine experiences. A story doesn't need to have a grand plot or a huge twist to make an impact. Sometimes the most powerful stories come from everyday moments. Think about the last time you had a conversation with a close friend or family member. It wasn't about grandiose events, but rather the small, relatable details that made the story meaningful. When you tell a story that's rooted in authenticity, people can connect with it in a way that feels real. One key aspect of effective storytelling is the use of details. Details bring your story to life, making it more vivid and engaging. Instead of simply saying, "It was a difficult situation," describe what made it difficult. What did you feel? What did you see? What were the stakes? The more sensory details you add, what you heard, saw, or even smelled, the more your audience will feel like they were there with you. A story with rich details feels more alive, more real, and more compelling. However, while details are important, it's also essential to keep the story focused. It's easy to get carried away with too many tangents or unnecessary information. A good story has a clear point or message, and every detail should serve to support that message. If something doesn't add to the story or help move it forward, it's better to leave it out. People appreciate stories that get to the point and don't waste time. That doesn't mean you shouldn't be descriptive or engaging. Just be mindful of what matters and what doesn't. Another important element of storytelling is emotion. Emotions are what make a story memorable. People remember how you made them feel even more than they remember what you said. When you tell a story that evokes emotion, whether it's joy, fear, sadness, or excitement, you're tapping into something deeper than just the facts. Emotion connects people on a human level. It makes them feel something that resonates with them long after the conversation is over. As you tell your story, don't be afraid to show vulnerability. Vulnerability is one of the most powerful tools in storytelling. When you're open and honest about your struggles, failures, or moments of doubt, people can relate to you in a way that they can't if you're only sharing successes. Vulnerability humanizes you and makes you more approachable. It creates a sense of trust and connection. And often, these are the stories that people remember the most, the ones where you show who you really are, rather than just the polished version of yourself. Another aspect to consider is timing. The best stories are told at the right time. If you're telling a story in a conversation, it should fit the moment. Don't force a story into a situation where it doesn't feel natural. The flow of a conversation matters. If you're sharing a story to make a point, make sure it's relevant to the topic at hand. And just as important, know when to stop. A story can lose its impact if it goes on too long or feels like it's dragging. Keep your story concise and make sure it has a clear ending. One technique that's often overlooked is the use of pauses. Pauses are incredibly effective in storytelling because they build suspense and give your audience time to absorb what you've just said. Pausing at key moments, especially before a big reveal or punchline, can heighten the emotional impact of the story. It gives your audience space to reflect on what's been said and builds anticipation for what comes next. Another important element of storytelling is engaging the audience. A story is a conversation, not a lecture. This means that your audience should feel like they're part of the experience. One way to do this is by asking questions during your story or involving them in some way. For example, instead of just saying, "I learned an important lesson that day," you might say, "Have you ever been in a situation where you thought you couldn't handle it, but you found a way to push through?" This gets your audience thinking about their own experiences and makes them feel more connected to your story. At the end of the day, the power of storytelling lies in its ability to connect. It's a tool for building relationships, for creating empathy, and for sharing our experiences with others. The stories we tell shape how we are perceived, how we relate to one another, and how we make sense of the world. By learning to tell stories that are authentic, engaging, and impactful, we open up the possibility for deeper connections and more meaningful conversations. Storytelling isn't just a skill, it's a bridge between hearts. And when done well, it has the power to change the way people think and feel. Chapter 14. Managing emotions in conversations. Sometimes, conversations can quickly turn tense. Emotions run high, words get exchanged, and before you know it, what could have been a simple discussion becomes a full-blown argument. We've all been there. You're trying to express something important, but it's hard to get the words right without feeling frustrated. Or perhaps the person you're speaking with is defensive, unwilling to listen, and suddenly the situation is spiraling. The truth is, emotions play a huge part in how we communicate, and when they're not managed well, things can easily go south. Learning to manage your emotions and the emotions of others during tough conversations is one of the most important skills for effective communication. First, it's essential to recognize that emotions aren't something we can simply turn off. They are a natural human response to our thoughts and experiences. And whether we're aware of it or not, our emotions are always influencing the way we speak and listen. What happens in a difficult conversation is that our emotional reactions often take over, making it harder to think clearly and respond rationally. In those moments, it's easy to get defensive, angry, or upset, and that usually only escalates the conflict. But if we can pause and take a step back, we have the chance to regain control of the situation. One of the first steps in managing emotions in conversations is becoming aware of how we feel. It sounds simple, but how often do we actually stop and check in with ourselves before reacting to something someone else has said? It's so easy to get swept up in the moment, but when we can pause and identify what we're feeling, whether it's frustration, anxiety, or even excitement, it gives us the space we need to respond more thoughtfully. For example, if you feel yourself getting angry, instead of reacting immediately, take a deep breath. Recognize that the anger is there, but that it doesn't have to control your response. Acknowledging your emotions gives you the power to decide how to respond, rather than letting your feelings dictate your actions. It's also important to recognize that emotions aren't just internal. They're often visible to others through our body language, tone of voice, and facial expressions. You might feel calm on the inside, but if your arms are crossed, your voice is sharp, or you're avoiding eye contact, the other person will pick up on that. They'll interpret your behavior as defensive or closed off, even if that's not your intention. Being aware of these nonverbal cues can help you manage the message you're sending. When you feel emotions starting to rise, try to keep your posture open, your tone neutral, and your facial expression soft. It's not always easy, but it can make a huge difference in how the conversation unfolds. Another way to manage emotions in tough conversations is to practice active listening. Often, when emotions run high, we stop listening and start thinking about what we're going to say next. We're too focused on defending our own point of view that we fail to truly hear the other person's perspective. This creates a barrier between you and the person you're speaking with. Instead of trying to form a response while they're talking, focus entirely on what they're saying. Listen to understand, not to react. This can lower the emotional intensity of the conversation because it shows the other person that you care about their thoughts and feelings. When they feel heard, they're less likely to escalate the conversation, and you can both work toward a more productive outcome. Another tactic to manage emotions is empathy. When you understand where the other person is coming from, it becomes easier to keep your emotions in check. Try to put yourself in their shoes and imagine what they might be feeling. If someone is upset, it might not be about you. It could be because of a personal struggle they're dealing with, or they may feel unheard or dismissed. When you approach the conversation with empathy, it's easier to stay calm and respond with compassion, even if you don't agree with everything they're saying. Sometimes, no matter how hard we try, the conversation simply becomes too heated. When this happens, taking a break can be one of the most effective tools for diffusing the situation. There's no shame in pausing the conversation and saying, "I think we both need a moment to cool off." Stepping away from the situation gives both people the opportunity to gather their thoughts, calm down, and return to the conversation with a clear mind. This is especially important if emotions are starting to get the best of both parties. It's often the case that the conversation will be more productive once both people have had time to reflect on what's been said and what they want to achieve. Another way to manage emotions is through positive self-talk. It's easy to get caught up in negative thinking when we feel emotionally triggered. We might start thinking, "This person is never going to understand me," or "I'm just wasting my time." These thoughts can make it harder to stay calm, and they can also make the situation feel more personal than it actually is. Instead of falling into these patterns of negative thinking, try shifting your internal dialogue. Remind yourself that this is just a conversation, that it's okay to disagree, and that staying calm will help you communicate more effectively. You don't have to win every argument or convince the other person that you're right. Focus on finding a solution or understanding the other person's perspective. Managing your emotions doesn't mean you have to suppress them. It's not about pretending that you're fine when you're not. Rather, it's about channeling those emotions in a way that doesn't derail the conversation. When you feel frustrated or upset, express that in a constructive way. Instead of saying, "You always do this," try something like, "I feel frustrated when this happens because it makes it hard for me to communicate." By framing your emotions in terms of how they affect you rather than blaming the other person, you open the door for a more productive dialogue. Sometimes the best way to manage emotions is simply to stay present. When things get emotional, our minds often race ahead, imagining all sorts of outcomes and possibilities. This can make it harder to stay grounded in the present moment, which is essential for effective communication. Focus on the here and now in the conversation at hand. Focus on what's being said and on the solutions you're trying to find together. Staying present will help you keep your emotions in check and maintain a clear head throughout the exchange. Difficult conversations are a natural part of life. No one enjoys them, but they are often necessary for growth and progress, whether in personal relationships or professional settings. By learning to manage emotions, both your own and others, you can ensure that these conversations remain productive and respectful. When emotions are handled well, It becomes easier to communicate honestly, solve problems, and build stronger, more meaningful connections with the people around you. And in the end, that's what effective communication is all about. Chapter 15. Sometimes silence is the best response. There's a lot of power in silence. In the rush to always say the right thing to keep the conversation going, we often overlook the strength that comes from pausing and giving space. Silence can be a powerful tool, especially in tough conversations or when emotions run high. At times, it's more than just not speaking. It's an intentional pause that allows both you and the other person to reflect, digest, and perhaps reconsider what's been said. Knowing when to be silent is just as important as knowing when to speak. Imagine a moment when a heated argument is unfolding. Words are flying back and forth, tensions are rising, and you can feel the situation escalating. What if, instead of continuing to argue, you chose to step back and embrace the silence? Instead of saying something you might regret later, you simply take a breath and let the moment pass. By holding back from responding right away, you create an opportunity to calm down, think clearly, and avoid making the situation worse. Silence can be a way to regain control and prevent things from spiraling. Often, when we're involved in a conversation, we're thinking ahead to what we want to say next, especially if we feel strongly about something. The desire to respond quickly is natural, but it can lead us to react impulsively rather than responding thoughtfully. Pausing for a moment allows you to take a step back, collect your thoughts, and then decide what you want to say with a clearer perspective. In those moments, silence can be the wisest choice, especially if your emotions are running high or if the conversation is becoming unnecessarily tense. You might be surprised at how often a pause can turn a potentially negative interaction into something more meaningful and productive. When you choose silence, you also give the other person space to think. Sometimes people don't know how to express themselves clearly, and in that silence they may come to realize what they really want to say. It's easy to get caught up in the need to fix the situation or find a resolution right away. But the truth is, some answers need time to surface. Silence allows both parties to reflect and think before reacting. And when both sides have that opportunity, it often leads to more thoughtful, less reactive communication. There's also something deeply respectful about silence in conversation. It shows that you value the other person's thoughts and feelings. Instead of talking over them or cutting them off, you let them speak at their own pace, giving them the room they need to express themselves fully. Sometimes, when we're talking with others, we become so eager to share our point of view that we forget to listen. A moment of silence can be the most respectful thing you can offer in an exchange. It lets the other person know that their words matter. Silence can also create a sense of comfort. Imagine sitting with a close friend or family member in complete silence but feeling completely at ease. There's no need for constant chatter, no pressure to fill the space with words. This type of silence is a quiet form of connection. It's the kind of silence that doesn't need to be uncomfortable because it's built on trust and understanding. It's the same kind of silence that can exist between two people who've shared a long day together, not needing to speak to feel close. In the right context, silence isn't an absence of connection. It's a space where both parties can simply be without the pressure to perform in a conversation. In a tough conversation, silence can help you avoid saying things you might later regret. We've all had moments when we've let words slip out in the heat of the moment, words that we wish we could take back. Silence is a safeguard against that. Instead of reacting impulsively, a moment of stillness gives you the chance to process your feelings and choose your response carefully. It's easy to think that saying something immediately will help resolve a situation, but sometimes the best resolution comes from giving things time to settle. By holding your tongue, you create space for yourself and for the other person to approach the situation with a clearer mind. One of the most profound aspects of silence is its ability to change the dynamic of a conversation. Sometimes when we're speaking with someone who's upset or angry, they might be expecting us to react in a certain way. They might be anticipating a defensive response, or they might want us to counter their argument. But when you stay silent, it can disarm them. It forces them to reconsider their own approach, and sometimes even make them stop and reflect on what they've said. The lack of response is often enough to shift the tone of the conversation from confrontation to collaboration. By choosing silence, you give yourself the chance to break free from the usual cycle of escalation. Silence can also give us time to listen, to really hear what the other person is saying without interrupting or jumping to conclusions. Often, when we're caught up in a conversation, we're more focused on our own agenda than on what the other person is trying to communicate. But if you can pause and listen deeply, it can lead to deeper understanding and stronger communication. The silence gives you a moment to truly absorb their words without the pressure of responding right away. There's a certain power in choosing silence as a response. It's not weakness, it's strength. It's knowing that not every situation requires a response, and that sometimes the most powerful thing you can do is simply be present and listen. This kind of silence can be an act of self-control and emotional intelligence. You're demonstrating that you're not controlled by your immediate impulses, but that you're thoughtful, composed, and willing to allow the conversation to evolve on its own terms. When you're in a heated conversation or when tensions are high, sometimes silence can be the very thing that creates space for healing. Words can hurt, they can wound, and they can escalate conflict. But silence creates the opportunity for both people to reflect and recalibrate. It gives the conversation room to breathe, and in that space, the chance to find clarity. Silence is not about avoiding difficult conversations or avoiding conflict altogether. It's about being intentional with your words and actions, knowing when to speak and when to stay silent. Silence is not a gap in communication. It's a tool that, when used correctly, can make your communication more thoughtful, respectful, and effective. In a world where we're constantly bombarded with information and conversation, sometimes the most powerful thing you can do is pause and allow space for silence.